Video 6, about 11 minutes, 20 seconds in. I head over this way looking for this cave. I did do a little bit of looking around to try to find a decent cave off-screen. And I remember finding one in this general area. I couldn't remember exactly where it was, though. And I actually don't end up going in the cave that I remember finding. I also notice at this point that I am using a different mouse cursor. A big fat hand. That hand is actually taken from Mario Paint. I used that just because the big Windows mouse pointer really didn't fit with the narrative I was trying to give. It didn't look right. It was very immersion breaking. When I got my new computer later on, I never bothered switching back to this cursor though. Video 6, 14 and a half minutes in. The infamous cave from the series. This cave I actually didn't know how big was at the time. As I mentioned a moment ago, this isn't actually the cave I was even looking for. I found this cave completely by accident. But it's a completely legit cave sitting here. This is my first time exploring it as well, so I have no idea what's in store for me. I'm surprised the cave ended up being as big a thing as it did. At this point, the smaller part of the storyline I was kind of writing as I went. I only had the overarching idea in mind, not the individual adventures. So I'm really glad a lot of little incidental things happened along the way that actually helped build a really good series. Video 6 again, about 6 minutes 20 seconds in, when I'm walking into the dark like that. There's actually an issue with the color balance in the way I edited the videos back in the day. So it messed with the contrast a little bit when I exported the video. A lot of people would complain that they couldn't see anything when I remember being able to see things better in the actual video. And so I didn't even bother do anything with it, but that was an issue that I kind of wrestled with for a lot of the series. I just dealt with it and walked around in the dark for a little while where I was able to see, but the viewer was not due to this odd color balance issue. Eventually I found a way to be able to adjust the contrast so the viewer could see as well. This still wasn't the perfect solution, but it wasn't until much later after that that I actually found a way to properly get the correct colors out of the initial recording. Video 8, right at the beginning. Between videos, I actually set myself up to figure out what was where and how to approach this next area. So I seemingly go right out and find a couple diamonds, and that's really just because I took a look around to find them. All of the diamonds that I found down here are completely legitimately found. There were actually a couple people thinking that I staged it and that a lot of this was a little faked, but really, if you go down to lava level, that's just where you'll find diamonds. They're not nearly as rare as one would think, as long as you're looking in the right area. But that aside, in looking through the whole area down here, not only did I figure out where those diamonds were, but I also looked around to figure out where the abandoned mineshaft was that we end up in later on. And I even looked around that to figure out where I was going to go in that. So this whole video is kind of on rails in that regard. I know where I'm going and how I'm doing it. I had even planned that I was going to get lost in the abandoned mineshaft. Video 8, about 4 minutes, 15-20 seconds into it. You actually saw a little bit of static on the screen, and I thought that was oddly a little foreboding that it would happen. But that was actually an error in compressing it. You see, with Vegas, if you don't close down the entire program and then reopen it just to convert it, like when you're done editing, if you just hit the convert button, you'll usually get little errors like that in the video. Also, I completely understand that this is the absolute worst possible way to get out of a cave. I'm doing this because I wanted to show off everything that was underground that you can encounter. The abandoned mine shafts and the actual little mossy cobblestone dungeons. So I wanted to show those off while I was down here, which is why I was venturing in this direction. I had explored around earlier, as I mentioned, and I knew that both of them were over here for me to be able to show off. Video 8, about 7 minutes 40 seconds in. This little passageway I find here, this is the only way I artificially modified this entire cave. I actually dug that little passageway, that little hallway myself, to connect the cave that I was in to this other cave that had the dungeon and the abandoned mineshaft in it. Video 9, 7 minutes 10 seconds into the video, and I start dealing with the spiders. This is actually my second take at this. This is the first time I actually died during a recording and had to re-attempt the recording. Thankfully, too many items lets you save your inventory, which I did before every recording. But I did die to these little spiders, and that's mostly because I completely underestimated how powerful that poison is. I got poisoned once again, actually on video, and I was scared I was going to die again there.
That only hurt a little.
I got my inventory back thanks to too many items, but my experience, I wasn't so lucky. I ended up just going back to the previous room that had the zombies in it, and farming those zombies to get my experience back up to what it was at the beginning of the recording. It took a fair amount of time. But pretty much this entire recording, this entire video up until this point, was me faking that this was the first time that I'd run through. I also completely understand that I don't need that many saddles, and a lot of people were asking or yelling at me to drop some of the saddles that I had. And the reason I had that many is because every time that I had tried to get the When Pigs Fly achievement before, I had a huge amount of trouble actually getting it to work. I had killed numerous pigs trying to do it on my own in the past, so I was expecting it to still be just as troublesome. Video 9, about 19 minutes in, the room we see there was actually the large brown, like dirt-bottomed room that we were in almost at the beginning of the entire mine shaft. I was actually a little heartbroken and distressed to see that we were back at that, because I was doing my best to disorient the viewer, so it was more obvious that I was just completely lost. So when I ended up back at a known landmark early on at that, I wasn't really sure what to do. I wasn't in a position to really be able to edit it out, and I didn't want to ignore that it was there, or I was sure the viewers would notice what it was and point it out. However, you do see me do a couple fade cuts from here on. And that was me realizing that no matter how disoriented I try to make the viewer, I can't actually make the viewer completely lost, because they can always go back and watch the video again to see how I got there and know how to get back. I made those fade cuts so the viewer was disoriented. After just one, the viewer now no longer has any idea where I am and is just as lost as I was. Video 9, about 22 minutes 45 seconds in, I actually left the mine shaft about as far from the entrance as I possibly could. That was about as far as I could go, and I left that not only because there was this ravine lava area over here that was kind of pretty, but also because, if memory serves, there were some more diamonds down here. I wanted to collect more diamonds so that I could get out. I was actually running around for a little bit. I was trying to find the diamonds that I knew were here. Video 9, about 26 minutes, 15 seconds in, 26 minutes even. The quote I say is actually a quote directly from a movie. It's actually a quote we toss around in the... just toss around the house every now and then. But one thing you'll notice here is my level right there is 0. I have no experience. I managed to mimic my inventory, but I did not mimic my experience level. The reason for this is simply because for this little bit of recording, I actually recorded this on a server with my father, which means this was an entirely different character than normal. Now, it's been mentioned that that little island is not actually where I came up. That was entirely done for plot-related reasons. In fact, I mentioned that you'd be surprised if you knew where you came up, and where you came up, if you look directly below the house, you can actually see the entire mine right here, almost directly underneath the house. In fact, where we came up was actually just over here. You can see the staircase going up there in the distance. But that's where I dug up, and it took me directly out into the middle of a little lake here. And in coming up, if you just took a quick cursory glance around, you could climb to the top of one of these little hills, and you could see the house right there, so I really wasn't that far. Video 10, 3 minutes, 20 seconds in. While I'm riding on the boat, I actually had every intention of showing off all the little nuances of Minecraft just in the first season, which is why I wanted to show off the compass and the boat here. In fact, the whole reason I did this excursion out like this was to show off those two things. However, I did cut to night partway through and mentioned that I was just going to take a nap overnight and then we'd continue sailing in the morning. And the reason I did this was to help show the progression of time, to make it feel like I was really sailing for a very long time. I don't think I did it very well, though. The sailing before and after really wasn't long enough to give that impression. It just felt like a random scene right in the middle of the sailing. Video 10, about 9 minutes in, I find the NPC village, and one of the things I was trying to show is that though I was coming across as the mentor for the vast majority of the first season, that just simply knew how things worked and what things did, I did want to point out that there were a couple things that I wasn't super comfortable with. And that's what I was trying really hard to get across in this NPC village, was that this is something new that even I didn't understand. I wasn't completely knowledgeable about everything. That said, how I treated the villagers, I'm not entirely positive what I was trying to get across. Maybe I was thinking that they were so frightened by that same godlike entity that they'd simply lost all individuality and will to live. That's something that really lost a lot of its impact as time went on, though, and I didn't really think it out that well at the time. I have gotten a lot of flack for not picking up the obsidian in this house, though, and I know that there are no repercussions for doing it in the game itself, but from a narrative standpoint, this character just met all these villagers. I'm not going to just take everything from them. Video 10, about 13 minutes in, I do a fade edit at one point right there. I actually did that because I was getting some really terrible lag spikes in the game, and I couldn't really explain why or figure out why they were happening, so I just tried to edit them out. Now, on the way home, this is video 11 at about 5 minutes 40 seconds in. We go through a small swamp area, and I actually refer to it as a jungle. This is a mistake I made a couple times, simple slip of the tongue. But if you look at the compass is actually pointing almost directly sideways. So a lot of people were even telling me at this point that I should really just follow the compass. In fact, at some points it seemed like I was going the opposite direction of the compass. And the mistake of this is in the map that I was currently in, which I'll get to this momentarily. The spawn point actually wasn't where it originally was. So, not only was I taking a slightly more roundabout path home, but the compass was actually pointing to a location that exaggerated that. Good. Video 11, 8 minutes 40 seconds in. When I say I should remember that, I really should. This is where I got the entire army of animals together.
It's as though I've been here
Though
before,
just a moment ahead now, I'll see a couple pumpkins, and mentioned that I don't remember seeing those pumpkins near our own home.
Really that close to home?
And this is true. Those pumpkins were never near our home. You see, what I did is I reseeded the map. By this point, Minecraft had updated to 1.1. The world was originally created in 1.0. But in 1.1, seeing as the version of Minecraft actually determines how the seed is interpreted, I simply created a new world with the exact same seed on a different version, on the different newer version of Minecraft. Now, since not much had changed as far as the world being developed is concerned, the world was almost identical, but still not quite the same. And that's why there are just a couple little discrepancies here and there.
Everything's here. Our pumpkins are here.
This does mean, though, since I essentially started a new world, I rebuilt my house from scratch. Granted, I did have too many items to help me along, but I did remake this entire house from scratch at the exact same location that it was at previously. Video 11, near the end of the video, about 12.5 minutes in, pay attention to the compass. In fact, pay attention to it a little bit before this. You'll note that the compass doesn't actually point towards the center of the house, the spawn point, as it did before. This was my own mistake in making the new world. The home point is actually pretty far off to one side in the middle of the forest. And I didn't get around to fixing that, and I'm surprised nobody really noticed that the compass wasn't pointing towards our spawn point. Now, this is the home you're probably a little bit more familiar with. This is actually the home of the reseeded map. The second one. It even has the grave for Doggy. This is where we've built the long track. This is where we've built the nether portal. And if we take a look over the hill over here, you'll notice that the giant structure that was there before is suspiciously absent. As I mentioned, this is a reseeded map. So it's the same seed, just a brand new map on a slightly newer version of Minecraft. Now, for plot-related reasons, what I was doing at the time, and the reason I did this, I realize I didn't actually destroy all of that sand. Silly me. But plot-wise, the reason I did this... Oh no, actually it makes sense that the sand is out there because it's a reseeded map. I hadn't touched this one, aside from rebuilding the house out here. But for plot-related reasons, the reason I was doing this is I was thinking this was around the time our friend was beginning to remember his own power, and he kind of flexed it a little bit, and it just subtly altered the world. Admittedly, this is back when I was still imagining him as simply being a malevolent god who had forgotten his power and forgotten how evil he was. So he just latched onto me for a little while until that came back to him.